His face was tired, framed by the unfamiliar beige wall of his ex-wife's apartment. The video feed crackled, distorting the gentle expression he always wore right before delivering bad news. "Gianna," he started, his voice a soft poison through the laptop speakers. "Based on Caroline's condition, I don't think I can leave her at the end of her treatment. I think we should postpone the wedding." He didn't even flinch. He just watched my face, waiting for me to absorb the blow. He wanted me to nod, to understand, to be the ever-patient partner I had always been. "Until February, at least," he added, as if tacking on a date made the betrayal any smaller. The words hung in the air between us, static-filled and devastating. He was telling me, not asking me, to put our entire future on hold indefinitely. He expected me to wait patiently while he played husband to another woman. In that moment, the man I was supposed to marry felt like a complete stranger. "My name is Gianna. For the last 3 years, my life was a perfectly orchestrated event plan, and I was the master coordinator. At 26, I had a career I loved, a beautiful apartment we had chosen together, and a wedding to my fiancé, Max, just 5 months away. Everything was on schedule. I'm a planner by nature. I find a deep satisfaction in creating order out of chaos. My work binders have color-coded tabs, and my personal life was no different. Max used to joke that I had a spreadsheet for our future. He wasn't wrong. It was a future built on what I thought was the most solid foundation of all: trust. Then his ex-wife re-entered the picture. Her name was Caroline, a woman I only knew from a few faded photographs Max kept in a box in his closet. She came back not as a threat, but as a tragedy. She had a devastating diagnosis: stage 4 cancer. My heart shattered for her. I couldn't imagine the fear and the loneliness. I saw her not as an ex, but as a human being facing the worst possible news. My empathy, my need to fix things, kicked in immediately. When Max told me he needed to fly to the West Coast to be her support system, I didn't hesitate for a second. He presented it as a noble, temporary duty. He said he was the only one she had, and that he couldn't live with himself if he abandoned her in her darkest hour. I believed him. Of course, I believed him. The alternative, that he would lie about something so horrific, was simply unthinkable. I was the one who packed his bag, carefully folding his sweaters and making sure he had his favorite travel pillow. I kissed him goodbye at the airport and told him to be strong for her. His trip was supposed to last 2 weeks, just long enough to get her settled into her treatment plan and find her a home health aide. 2 weeks. I marked it on our kitchen calendar with a heart. But 2 weeks turned into a month. The excuse was that the first round of chemotherapy had hit her harder than expected. He said she was too weak to be left alone. I understood. I sent care packages with her favorite teas and comfortable blankets. I was supporting him, supporting her. Then 1 month bled into 2. The daily Skype calls, once the highlight of my lonely evenings, dwindled to twice a week. His updates became vaguer. He was always tired, always stressed. He started sleeping on her sofa, he said, because she was afraid to be alone at night. Meanwhile, I was back home, living in the ghost of our life together. I was planning our wedding by myself. I sat through cake tastings, describing to the baker what Max's favorite flavors were. I stared at seating charts, the space for his family, an empty question mark. I would send him pictures of floral arrangements and venue layouts, trying to include him, to keep him connected to the future we were supposed to be building. His replies were always delayed, always short. "Looks great, babe. You have amazing taste. I trust you." He wasn't a partner in the planning anymore. He was a ghost I was trying to keep alive. I started to feel like I was mourning a relationship that wasn't even over yet. The meticulous plans, the color-coded binders, they all felt like a fantasy I was clinging to. Friends started asking questions I couldn't answer. "When is Max coming home?" My patient smiles started to feel brittle. I defended him, explaining the gravity of the situation, praising his selflessness. I told myself his distance was a symptom of his grief and stress. I buried my own loneliness under a mountain of tasks. I finalized the caterer. I booked the photographer. I sent out the save the dates with our picture on them, the two of us smiling, completely unaware of the fault line about to crack our world open. And then came that Skype call. The call where he looked at me through a screen from 1,000 miles away in his ex-wife's apartment and dismantled our entire future in under a minute. He didn't see a partner on the other end of the line. He saw a problem he needed to manage. Postpone, he had said, not cancel. Postpone. It was a masterful, cowardly choice of words. It was designed to keep me on the hook, to leave me waiting in the wings until he decided what he wanted. He was counting on my loyalty, on my empathy for a dying woman. He was counting on the fact that I would never question the story. He believed his lie about her cancer was the perfect emotional blackmail, a tragedy so profound that it would make me feel guilty for having any needs of my own. He thought I would just passively wait. He was wrong. As I stared at his pixelated face, the face of a man I no longer recognized, the meticulous planner inside me didn't shatter. She woke up. The chaos he had created wasn't a tragedy to be managed. It was a mess to be cleaned up. All the love and loyalty I had poured into our relationship curdled into something cold and clear. The trust I had given him so freely was a foundation he had dynamited himself. And a good event coordinator never leaves a mess. You clear the wreckage and you start again. My wedding was still 5 months away. The venue was booked. The deposits were paid. And I realized with chilling certainty that the event would proceed. Just with a new plan. My wedding was still 5 months away. The venue was booked. The deposits were paid. And I realized with chilling certainty that the event would proceed. Just with a new plan. My first instinct was to scream. I wanted to hurl my laptop against the wall and watch the screen spiderweb into 1,000 pieces, just like my heart. I felt a hot surge of tears behind my eyes, a tidal wave of grief and rage threatening to break. But it never came. Instead, a strange and profound calm washed over me, extinguishing the fire in my chest. It was cold and clear, like a deep breath of winter air. All the hurt, the resentment, and the crushing loneliness of the past 2 months came together into a single, hard point of clarity. The relationship was over. He had already left me. He just hadn't done me the courtesy of saying the words. Slowly, deliberately, I reached out and closed the laptop. The quiet click of the lid shutting was the sound of a door closing forever. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I simply stood up and walked to the small desk in the corner of our living room, my living room. I pulled a fresh legal pad from the drawer, its yellow paper clean and full of potential. I picked up my favorite black ink pen, the one I used for signing contracts and finalizing timelines. At the top of the first page, in neat, steady block letters, I wrote a new project title: Project Dissolution. The frantic, heartbroken energy of a jilted fiancé was gone. In its place was the quiet, methodical focus of a professional with a complex event to manage. My event was now my own exit, and it would be executed with flawless precision. Max's fatal flaw was his complete and utter overconfidence. He thought he knew me. He saw me as the loving, patient, supportive fiancé who would wait forever, tangled in the emotional blackmail of his noble sacrifice. He saw my meticulous planning for our life as a cute quirk, not as a core component of who I am. He forgot that my entire career is built on logistics. My job is to anticipate problems, create contingency plans, and execute complex operations under pressure. He had just become the biggest logistical problem of my life, and I was about to solve him. I spent the next 48 hours creating the most important event plan I would ever manage. There was no time for grief. Grief was a luxury I would afford myself later, in a new apartment, surrounded by my own things. For now, there was only the checklist. First, housing. I didn't waste time on rental websites. I called a commercial real estate broker I'd worked with to secure event venues. I told her I needed a 1-bedroom apartment, available for immediate move-in, in a secure building. By noon the next day, I was signing a lease. Next, finances. Max and I had a joint savings account for the wedding. I logged into our online banking portal and stared at the balance. My half, earned from my own salary, was transferred immediately into a new account under my name only. I took screenshots of the transaction, the account balance, and every major deposit we had both made. Documentation was everything. Then the movers. I scheduled them for a Friday morning, a time I knew Max would be accompanying Caroline to a treatment session. He wouldn't think to call. I started packing, but not with sadness. It was a clinical sorting process. His books, his clothes, his writing awards, all went into boxes labeled Max. My things were packed with care, ready for their new home. The apartment we had built together, once a symbol of our future, was now just a project site. Every action was precise, every decision was calculated. I was a machine of efficiency, fueled by a cold, quiet anger that burned brighter and steadier than any passionate rage. But the logistics were just the setup. The centerpiece of my plan, the main event, wasn't for me. It was for Caroline. In Max's twisted narrative, she was the tragic obstacle. But I saw the truth. She was just as much a victim of his manipulative play as I was. He was using her illness to trap both of us. She deserved the truth, and I was going to deliver it. I sat down with a fresh sheet of paper and began to write her a letter. My handwriting was as steady as it was when I wrote the project title. There was no anger in my words, no accusation. There was only clear, concise, and undeniable fact. I explained who I was. I told her how sorry I was about her diagnosis and that I had been thinking of her. Then I laid out the truth of Max's deception, item by item, like a budget report. I told her that Max had informed me her cancer was stage 4 and terminal, a lie designed to secure my infinite patience. I included a printout from a medical website explaining the much higher survival rates for stage 2, which I suspected was the truth. I wrote that he had painted himself as a martyr to me. He claimed he was staying on the West Coast against her wishes, that she had graciously told him to go home to me, but that his conscience wouldn't allow it. He was building his own heroic myth on a foundation of lies, making her the unwitting co-star. I wanted her to know the man she was leaning on was a coward, using her pain as a shield. The final piece was the engagement ring. I twisted the diamond on my finger, the one we had picked out together on a sunny afternoon that now felt like a scene from someone else's life. It wasn't a symbol of love anymore. It was a prop in a failed production. I slid it off my finger. It felt surprisingly light. I placed the ring back in its velvet box. I folded the letter, tucked it inside with the ring, and closed the lid. The package was small, but its contents were explosive. I couldn't mail it from our apartment. Max was a writer. He was clever. He would recognize the local postmark and might intercept it. This required one final logistical step. I called my most trusted friend, Sarah. I explained nothing, only that I needed her to mail a small, important package for me from her office downtown, a completely different zip code. She agreed without question. As I handed her the small, perfectly wrapped box, I felt the last piece of my old life click cleanly into place. The plan was in motion. The event had been launched. Max thought he had postponed our future. He had no idea he had just initiated its complete and total demolition. He would never see it coming. He would never see it coming. The final piece of my plan was triggered by a simple email notification from the Postal Service. Your package has been delivered. I waited one more day. I let the truth settle in that small West Coast apartment for 24 hours, a silent poison seeping into the foundation of his lies. Then, sitting on a cardboard box in the middle of our half-empty living room, I initiated the final Skype call. He answered on the third ring, his face appearing on my screen. He looked exactly as he had before, weary, a little disheveled, with that practiced expression of noble exhaustion he had perfected over the past 2 months. He was expecting another call where he would perform his grief and I would perform my support. I didn't waste time on greetings. I didn't ask how he was. I looked directly into the camera, my voice even and steady, and delivered the first line of my new script. Max, we're done. He blinked, a flicker of confusion crossing his features. He launched into the familiar routine, the gentle, placating tone I now recognized as pure manipulation. Gianna, honey, I know this is hard. I am so sorry for what I'm putting you through, but Caroline is just so. I cut him off, not by raising my voice, but by lowering it. I know, Max. The color began to drain from his face. My calm was more terrifying to him than any rage would have been. I know about the lie. I know it's stage 2. Silence. For the first time in our entire relationship, Max was utterly speechless. His charming, sensitive writer persona evaporated, leaving behind a pale, cornered coward. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. He looked like a fish gasping for air. I continued, my voice retaining its clinical precision. You built this entire fantasy on a foundation of deceit. You didn't just lie to me about a wedding date, you lied about life and death. You used a woman's real illness as your cover story. I let that sink in, watching the panic flicker in his eyes. You didn't just betray me, Max. You exploited her. You used her pain to make yourself a hero in a story where you are the only villain. He started to stammer, his mind finally catching up, desperately trying to formulate a defense, a new lie to cover the old one. Gianna, wait, you don't understand. But I wasn't finished. I delivered the final, perfectly timed line. By the way, I sent Caroline the ring back. I included a note explaining everything. I figured she deserved to know the truth about the man sleeping on her couch. The horror that dawned in his eyes was absolute. It was the look of a master manipulator who has lost complete control of his own narrative. He wasn't just losing me, he was being exposed. His carefully constructed world, with him at the center as the tragic hero, was imploding in real time, and he was trapped at ground zero. Before he could form a single, coherent word, I moved my cursor over the red button on the screen. Goodbye, Max. I clicked end call. The screen went black. My first action was to pick up my phone. I found his contact, scrolled to the bottom, and pressed block this caller. A small, simple act that felt like slamming a steel door shut. A profound sense of relief washed over me. It was so potent, so physical, that I had to take a deep, shuddering breath. It felt like I could breathe fully for the first time in months. The weight of his lies, of my forced patience, of the constant, low-grade anxiety, it all just lifted. I was free. The next day, the movers arrived. The apartment was a whirlwind of organized chaos, the life we had built together being methodically disassembled and packed away. I directed the crew with the same calm focus I'd had for days, a general supervising her final maneuver. As they were loading the last of my boxes onto the truck, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting a message from the moving company. Instead, it was a text from an unknown number. My heart didn't pound. My hands didn't shake. I simply read the 3 words on the screen. Thank you, C. That was it. That was all I needed. It was the final item on my checklist, the confirmation that the event had been a complete success. My plan had worked. I hadn't just saved myself from a life built on deceit. I had given Caroline the truth she deserved. I pictured Max, trapped, no longer a noble caregiver but a revealed liar. He was living in the home of a woman who now saw him for exactly what he was. He had lost his adoring fiancé, his heroic cover story, and all control of the situation. He was finally, truly on his own. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, turned to the foreman, and signed the final paperwork. The project was complete. I walked out of the empty apartment, closed the door behind me, and didn't look back. I walked out of the empty apartment, closed the door behind me, and didn't look back. That single, simple act was the beginning. It was the first step into a life that was completely and utterly my own. That feeling of a new beginning wasn't just a fleeting emotion. It was the first day of a new project, the most important one I would ever manage, my own life. Now, a year has passed, and the quiet satisfaction of that day has blossomed into a reality more fulfilling than any I had ever planned with him. For the first few months, I poured all my energy into my work. The meticulous focus I once used on wedding seating charts was now aimed at building a business. I took the biggest risk of my life and launched my own boutique event planning agency. The name was simple, Gianna & Co. Events. The Co. was aspirational. For a while, it was just me. I remember the thrill of signing my first major client, the crisp sound of the pen as I countersigned the contract under my own company name. I designed my own logo, created my own project binders, and worked harder than I ever had before. The chaos of launching a business was invigorating. It was my chaos to control, my order to create. And it's thriving. The company has grown, and I've even hired my first employee. We specialize in complex, high-stakes events that other planners find too stressful. I've discovered that my calm under pressure, the very trait Max took for granted, is my greatest professional asset. The apartment that was once my sterile escape pod is now a home. The cardboard boxes are long gone, replaced by bookshelves filled with my own books. The walls, once bare, now hold photographs of my friends, of trips I've taken, of moments of pure, uncomplicated joy. There are no pictures of Max. It's a space filled with laughter and the smell of good coffee. My friend Sarah comes over for dinner every Tuesday. We drink wine and talk about clients and life. My home is no longer a temporary shelter from a storm. It is my anchor. I hear things about Max occasionally, through the quiet grapevine of our old friend group. The updates come in small pieces, like fragments of a story I no longer need to read. Sarah told me the most important part a few months ago. Caroline finished her treatment. The prognosis is good. She responded well to the therapy because her cancer was, as I suspected, stage 2. It was never the death sentence Max had described. I felt a wave of genuine relief for her. She had faced a real battle, not a fictional one. After her final round of treatment, she politely but firmly asked Max to leave. There was no dramatic confrontation, just a quiet, final dismissal. He had served his purpose, and once the truth was known, that purpose was revealed to be entirely selfish. His heroic performance was over, and there was no applause. He had nowhere to go. He couldn't come back to our apartment. I was long gone. He tried to crawl back to our old friends, attempting to spin a new tale of heartbreak and misunderstanding. But the truth had followed him. My methodical, factual letter to Caroline had armed her with irrefutable proof of his deception. The story spread. No one was buying his charming, sensitive writer act anymore. They had seen the coward underneath. He had lost his future with me, and by using her illness as a tool, he had destroyed any chance of a real one with her. The last I heard, he is adrift. He's staying on a friend's couch, the very situation he pretended to be in with Caroline. He is a man who sacrificed a real, loving partnership for a nostalgic fantasy. In his desperate attempt to avoid being the bad guy, he became something much worse. He ended up with nothing but the truth of his own character for company. Sometimes I think about the engagement ring, sitting in its velvet box in Caroline's possession. When I sent it back, I intended for it to be a final, stinging reminder of what he had thrown away. I wanted it to be a symbol of me, of the life he had betrayed. It turns out it was something far more powerful. It wasn't a reminder, it was a catalyst. It didn't just end our story, it triggered the complete collapse of his. I sent that ring as a final act of closure for me. I never imagined it would become the instrument of his total ruin.